Welcome back to On Texas Football Weekend Update, talking winter conditioning, some standouts, some vocal leaders. Where are the coaches currently as well? We'll keep this more team-oriented. We'll have a little recruiting update coming tomorrow. But I'm CJ Vogel, joined by Gerry Hamilton. The first thing I want to talk about is, 2 weeks wrapped up of winter conditioning. The folks on campus, the newcomers, the early enrollees, they're finally getting the hang of things, Gerry. They're going to classes. They're getting their grades. And now they're getting their morning workouts in as well. There's 2 sessions each day. Of course, these guys are in and out of the weight room doing drills on the field, getting Tory Becton's best, essentially, is what's going on campus right now. I wanted to start with this because I'm sure you and I have dealt with this. Your best friends have dealt with this. Some family members have dealt with this. Around the last month or so, there's been a bit of the sniffles, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. It's been running rampant, whether it be in Austin, Dallas, Houston, wherever. And obviously, we've talked about it, Gerry. Steve Sarkisian was not present for the Texas Junior Day, January 25th. Of course, that was a pretty big deal at the time when Texas hosted a number of 26 and 27 recruits to not have the head guy there. I've been told that's actually trickled down to a number of the players as well. Just look, not being 100%. That's not easy to do this early into a semester. A couple of guys have been asked to miss practice, miss workouts, just in the sense get back to health. Don't let this trickle all the way down to the rest of the team. But also across a couple other Texas athletics as well. Women's basketball asked a few players not to travel on their most recent road trip for the sense that they needed health on their team for the duration of the season as well. So certainly something to monitor. When we talk about it with Sarkisian, Gerry, I mean, look, you finally get the opportunity to kick back, relax, and just take a load off for these coaches at the moment. But moving forward, to get these guys back at full strength when it's time for them to return to campus is going to be important.
No, it is. And I mean, no doubt. And it's kind of at the only time that could be a perfect time, if you will. I mean, Sark has also given the coaches, his staff, about a week off. They're out of the office. I think they come back on the 17th. So about 10 days off. And that's not just Texas. That's a lot of other places. I had a coaching buddy who was out of the country that I talked to the other day. That's a Power 4 assistant coach. So I think with the longer season, the portal window, the January recruiting window before spring practice, you're seeing these head coaches all get together and say, you know what, 10 days off mid-February for the staff. And so that's good for us. The Texas staff's dispersed around the country wherever they go when they're not in, which is probably a good thing right now because of how much sickness has kind of been floating around the 40 acres in athletics.
And of course, with these coaches not on campus for the winter workouts, it's enabled some young cats, some fresh faces to kind of take over some of those leadership roles for winter workouts. Of course, Tory Becton and his group are the ones leading workouts every morning at DKR in the weight room. There were 3 names mentioned to me in the week leading up to now that have really stood out so far during winter conditioning. And Gerry, I want to get your thoughts on each. First, I mean, Michael Taft is going to be a guy that's vocal, leading the way by example, by, of course, his voice. That was one of the names that certainly we heard last year in terms of getting that group ready. Leadership committee guy doing it already again this year. The next is Anthony Hill. Of course, he mentioned to me right after the Cotton Bowl, the loss to Ohio State. What can he improve on? Well, he said not anything on the field right away, but being that vocal voice for the defense, leading the way by example as well. He's been someone that Texas has relied on and leaned on early on as well. And then Arch Manning. And I think this is going to be a new, or at least a more common and consistent trait about a Texas football team, is to see this leadership, this fiery kind of demonstration of being the example from the quarterback position. Not saying it wasn't Quinn, but just knowing his personality, knowing what Arch can do as well, it's a bit of an A to B flip in my eyes.
Yeah, I think Arch is in a the other 2 guys, you totally expect that you hear that about Anthony Hill and Michael Taft. But I think the 2 years that Arch has kind of not been the leader, where he's always been the leader, is a pretty good spot to be in for him. Because he sat back and really learned his teammates, right? He learned them not from a leading position, but as being one of them. And when you step into a leadership role, and he's fiery, and you're going to see a lot of emotion out of him. He has got a little, one of his Red Bull commercials has got some swag to him, right? So that comes out in your leadership, right? And there's different ways to lead, even vocally. But he's had a while to sit back and really, and first guy in the facility, right, CJ?
Yeah.
He studies these guys. He's studying everything from a professional level to be ready to be the starting quarterback at Texas. So what does that mean? Even though you're not on the field, you're observing. You know what button to push with Ryan Wingo. You know what button to push with DeAndre Moore, and it's probably a different button. There's guys have different personalities. You may know which of your receivers is an audio learner versus a visual learner. If you're really doing your job in your time where you're developing, you're sitting here watching these guys, and that's all part of leadership. I mean, hey, when you talk to DeAndre Moore and you're out there and he's a visual guy, you may show him versus talk to somebody else. And I'm not saying DeAndre is that, but those are the things that when you're don't come in and you're immediately the starter, you get a chance to sit back and observe and truly learn your teammates without the MIGs flying around. And I think that puts him in a really good position. I would venture a guess to say nobody knows the team better than Arch Manning does, because that has probably been ingrained in him. Look, you're developing on the field here while you're not playing, but your job is to know what makes every one of your teammates tick and learn as much as you can about those guys. So when you step into this role, you're ready.
On top of that, Jerry, I mean, you look at what the projected starting 11 is for the Longhorns. Well, it's a complete replacement, basically, of what was on the field last year. And, you know, you lose guys who have played multiple years, like a Kelvin Banks, a Jake Majors, Gunnar Helm, all of these vocal pieces that were already kind of established with this Texas football team. For the most part, these guys had been running with the second group with Arch Manning. So there's the familiarity, the already looking towards Arch for the play calls, for whatever the second group was doing in practice all of last year. So that's a bit of familiarity I wanted to mention as well. Certainly a great sign that 2 weeks into winter conditioning, that's one of the big names that we're starting to hear get the juices flowing for these winter workouts. Another note I wanted to mention is, look, we've talked about size. Texas has added year in and year out of the high school recruiting class. I sat down with somebody about a week ago who said, look, this group of guys that have already arrived as early enrollees, it's a different bunch, a different group of size. And, Jerry, this is even without Nick Townsend and the Coleman brothers, who 340, 350. Nick Townsend, I mean, a 230-pound body running 10.9. I mean, there's still some more size to come, yet this is a group that's already stood out in terms of physical appearance, mass, and just willingness to get on the field as well.
Yeah, look, I don't feel like we've even celebrated the number one recruiting class enough, right? But we're going to celebrate him for a couple of minutes here. Bobby asked on a show earlier this week, what was the most impressive thing about the recruiting class? And I said SEC size all up and down. To your point, CJ, and the person you talked to, I mean, look, offensive line, yes, even though only two of those guys are in. Defensive line from edge. I mean, when Lance Jackson and Justus Terry are standing next to each other and you're saying, well, they're going to be, edges and 5 techs, you're like, well, okay. Who's the inside guys? Oh, there's Myron Charles and there's Josiah Sharma. You're like, oh, this looks like an Alabama or Georgia recruiting class. Elijah Barnes at linebacker, big safeties, Jonah Williams, Zealous Hicks, who's all of 6'2" and about 190, right? The corners are tall, long-limbed guys. Cade Phillips walks in, you're like, whoa, that guy's got really long 80-inch wingspan. He's 6'1.5". The receivers, Khalik Lockett, tall kid, 6'2", legit 6'2", with an 80-inch wingspan and 11-inch hands. These guys all fit the mold, and it's the best group of, and it's probably why they're ranked the number one class, in all honesty. It's the best group of height, mass, and arm length of any class Texas assigned in my years doing this. And they all fit the SEC size requirement. So it's not surprising you're hearing that, and I think that's going to be the strength of this class.
Of course, I mentioned Nick Townsend. I mentioned the Coleman brothers, who are not part of the Texas winter workouts right now. Jonah Williams is across the highway at Dish, right? He's preparing for a baseball season, which first pitch will be next week. Also, yet to really get going with the football team. So that's a 5-star guy with all the athleticism, all the size, all the, prereqs that you're looking for and just described, Jerry. That's yet to really make an impact so far in winter workouts, something to keep an eye on for when his time does come.
Yeah.
But I wanted to pivot to a note that you put up. And look, we've talked about Justus Terry and how important he will be for the Texas football program. To begin his career, maybe at a position that wasn't necessarily expected, does it speak more to his body currently and where he will fit to get on the field right away? Or does it just fit, hey, he's a heck of a football player, throw him on the field and we'll develop him along the way, but we got to find a way to get him on the field immediately?
No, I think it's where he's at physically right now. In long term, he's going to be a 5'3" guy. He's similar to Alfred Collins, right? And I'm not saying he's the same player, but similar frames. Alfred ended up being 320. I'm not sure Justus ever really gets that big, though. But right now, look, he was in the high 250s when you saw him at a bowl practice, but he doesn't look like it. And he's around 272, 275 now. So he may get up in that 285 range, but starting spring practice, he's going to be working out at the jack position or that strong side defensive end position. Does that mean he won't cross train? No, it doesn't. But it's just more about where he's at physically, because one thing about the SEC, and the Ohio State is an SEC team, okay? The Ohio State game plus the SEC schedule is, you do have to have some mass on the interior to hold up in the run game. Now, he could be really good in the NASCAR package, right? Like Barron Sorrell was, like you think Ethan Burke and you think Zeno Meozulu could be, and then you have Lance Jackson. But I think it speaks more to where he's at frame-wise right now. You don't want to square peg round hole a young player. That's not helping him. How do you help? But that's not helping him. That's negative. So how do you help his progression as a player while he's developing physically? And I think it's a great thought by Texas, because it gives him the best pathway to kind of push to get on the field potentially, and it's going to build his repertoire. It's going to make him a more versatile player at the college level. So how long will this last? We'll see. I mean, he may hit 295 by August and plans change. I don't think that's going to be the case initially out of the gate. So I think it's a positive for Justus Terry. What it tells you is you can only tinker with that if a guy has a skill set out there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I was going to ask you, you've seen Justus Terry in high school. You've seen him on the practice field several times. I mean, does it strike you as a guy that can play both an edge spot and an interior spot? Are there traits that you saw that say, okay, it's easily translatable to both positions early in a college career?
Yeah, look, I think he's Michael Williams-like if he ever wanted to stay outside, but he's going to get bigger than Michael.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. Devontae Wyatt is who I think inside the Georgia program some people compared him to. Well, Devontae Wyatt was a 275-pound guy, I think, when he went JUCO. Then he ends up being 305, 310. So I think it's that natural progression, but I do think he has that skill. I think he has that skill set. I think look, I'm not saying he's going to play 30 snaps a game either. But what I am saying is he has the skill set. He has the mentality. He's come in with a professional worker's mindset like Kelvin Banks did. Anytime you have that plus a skill set, you have a chance wherever Texas puts you.
Of course, Texas, with its defensive line haul and all the transfers, going to have plenty of moving around before the season comes rolling, before spring even comes rolling, will be one of the big storylines that we're monitoring, as well as whether or not there will be a spring game is something that Texas and On Texas Football is monitoring right now. But of course, Jerry, I wanted to leave you with this, in terms of as we go about finding, new intel, new information about winter workouts, is there a player that you're just kind of chomping at the bit to hear about? Not so much how they're doing, but hey, what's their body transformations like? How are they doing in the weight room? How are they doing in school? Is there anybody like that that's just, I was a big fan of them in high school. What's the next step for them now that they've been on campus for about a month or so?
So, yeah, I mean, from the freshman class, that's a tough one for me. Maybe Khalid Lockett. Because he came in to Texas probably 6'2" and around 170, probably not even 170, right around there. Jamie French had a little bit more muscle on him naturally. So where's Khalid Lockett in his buildup of his frame? And is he going to get faster while he gets bigger? Because if he does, he's got a chance to be a tremendous player. So that would be one. James Simon is another one for me. because I do think with Cedric Baxter and Christian Clark both being out for the spring, Jaden Blue having gone pro, James Simon's going to have a great opportunity in front of him as a true freshman. Yeah. I mean, you have Trey Weiser and you have Jarrett Gibson, right? And you have the walk-on as well. That's a solid player, but that means Ricky Stewart and James Simon, and Simon's ahead of Stewart physically and as a football and a running back understanding position. James Simon, for me, as far as the guys who've been in the program a year, CJ, Brandon Baker at right tackle, and the other one's Santana Wilson at corner.
That's a great one. I've kind of been circling Santana Wilson. We've talked, of course, the Cade Phillips addition. Will he push Kobe Black for that starting spot? Santana Wilson also in the conversation, a guy who I watched pretty closely before that Cotton Bowl kickoff against Ohio State. Jerry, that body, the way that he's kind of developed and transformed since arriving, very encouraging. And the athleticism surely there as well. One name I wanted to mention in terms of who I will be trying to keep close on is how's Zelicek coming along. This is a guy that foregone his senior year. He said, you know what, I'm ready for college. I'm ready to get on college campus. How's he coming along year one? Because it's different, right? And normally you see guys, those 5-star caliber guys in a class, take that leap physically from a junior year to senior year. Well, when you skip that, now all of a sudden you're an early enrollee freshman. There's a lot of time that's gone between that. Another one, Josiah Sharma. Anybody who's watched his move-in photos for Texas, it looked like with that big coat that he had on, Jerry, that there were two of me in between. So and we talked about it last year with Alex January, coming in, having to lose about 10, 12, 15 pounds in that range, and then building back up. Is that something that they do again with Sharma? Of course, we'll see what the spring and how the rest of the winter conditioning workouts kind of develop moving forward. But that'll about do it for today. Of course, a busy weekend with football, the last real football game of the year tomorrow. So make sure to tune in. We'll have something tomorrow night for the big game.
What was your pick, CJ?
I've got the Chiefs. I can't have the Eagles.
What's
Producer Matthew, I'm sorry.
What's the line?
It's Chiefs by a point. So as close to a toss-up as you can get. Patrick Mahomes going for the three-peat. I'm all for it. Xavier Worthy hopefully becomes the first Longhorn to score a touchdown. Crazy stat, by the way, in Super Bowl history. So we'll see tomorrow night as well. Jerry, thank you very much for the time. And we'll have all future updates on ontexasfootball.com and here right now. So ring the bell, subscribe, and we'll catch y'all soon. Thank y'all very much and have a happy Saturday. Hook 'em.